There are moments in history that do not simply happen, but completely transform the world in a single night. And November 9th, 1989, was one of those moments, a night when fear began to disappear and people reclaimed something that had been taken from them for decades, their freedom. I am standing in Berlin, in a city that has been divided for nearly 30 years, a city where one side lives in openness and connection while the other exists under strict control and constant surveillance, separated by a wall of concrete, barbed wire, and armed guards. A wall that was never just about territory, but about ideology, power, and control over human lives. The Berlin Wall was built in 1961, and from that moment on, it became one of the most powerful symbols of the Cold War, dividing not only a city but families, friendships, and entire futures, as people on one side could no longer reach the other, and those who tried to escape often risked everything, sometimes even their lives. For years, this division seemed permanent, as if the wall would stand forever. But beneath the surface, something was changing, because across Eastern Europe, people were beginning to question authority, to challenge the systems that controlled them, and to demand something more, something better, something free. In East Germany, protests began to grow stronger and louder, with thousands of people gathering in the streets, no longer willing to accept restrictions on their movement, their speech, and their future. And although fear had kept many silent for years, that fear was slowly being replaced by courage. The government, once strong and unshakable, was beginning to weaken under the pressure, and the situation was becoming harder to control as more and more citizens demanded change, and the world was watching closely, knowing that something significant was about to happen. On the evening of November 9th, 1989, a press conference was held in East Berlin, and what was meant to be a controlled announcement would soon become one of the most important turning points in modern history, as an official began reading new travel regulations that would allow citizens to cross the border. However, confusion quickly followed, because when a journalist asked when these new rules would take effect, there was hesitation, uncertainty, and then an answer that would change everything. The official responded that the changes were effective immediately. That single word spread rapidly across the city, carried by television broadcasts, radio, and word of mouth, and within moments, thousands of people began moving toward the Berlin Wall, unsure of what would happen but determined to take this opportunity. As the crowds grew larger, the atmosphere became tense and electric, with people gathering at checkpoints, demanding to cross, while the guards, who had always enforced strict control, now faced a situation they had not been prepared for, as they had no clear orders on how to respond. The system that had once been rigid and absolute was suddenly uncertain, and the guards found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer number of people standing before them, people who were no longer willing to turn back. Time seemed to slow as the tension built, and then, in a moment that no one could have fully predicted, the barriers were opened, and just like that, the wall that had divided a city for decades lost its power. People began to cross from east to west freely, without resistance, without fear, and what followed was something extraordinary, as disbelief quickly turned into celebration, and the streets filled with emotion. Crowds climbed onto the wall itself, standing on top of what had once been an untouchable barrier, while others began breaking it apart with hammers and tools, chipping away at the concrete piece by piece, turning a symbol of division into fragments of history. All around, people embraced each other, strangers hugged as if they had known each other for years, and families that had been separated for decades were finally reunited, with tears, laughter, and overwhelming emotion filling the air. For many, this was more than just a political event. It was deeply personal, as parents saw their children again, siblings found each other after years apart, and the pain of separation began to fade, replaced by relief and joy. As the night continued, the energy in Berlin became unstoppable, and it was clear to everyone that this was not just a temporary moment, but the beginning of something much larger, something irreversible. By morning, the city had changed forever, as the Berlin Wall, though still physically standing in parts, no longer held any real power, because its meaning had been destroyed by the people themselves. This event marked more than the reunification of a city. It signaled the collapse of a system, the beginning of the end of the Cold War, and a shift in the balance of power across the world. What had once seemed impossible had become reality, and the fall of the Berlin Wall became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the strongest structures can fall when people come together with a shared desire for freedom. Standing here now, looking at what remains, it is hard to believe that just hours earlier, this wall represented fear, control, and separation, and yet now, it stands as a reminder of how quickly history can change. Because sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one decision, one shift to alter the course of the world forever. And on that night in 1989, that moment finally arrived.